Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have an exciting topic to discuss. Is AI the future of control engineering and OT security? Special guest joining us, Kevin Owens, the CEO of Cyberstorm Defense. He'll be joining Mr. Ralph Langner himself. If you're joining us on LinkedIn or on YouTube, feel free to use the comment in the chat section for any questions you might have throughout the discussion, and we'll be sure to address them at the end. From here, I'll pass it over to Ralph.
Thanks, Braxton. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this live stream, to this discussion on what seems to be the new hot topic. But I picked it up not because it's the hot topic, but as very few people know, I have a special relationship with AI because actually I started my company as an AI company, even though that's a long time ago. That was back in the 80s. And as a matter of fact, Braxton, if you can bring that up, here is my first company sign. That was actually it was placed on the building where I used to live, residential building. I started out as a one-man show. So the first company name was Langner Expert Systems. That was the thing back in the 80s. The first area of AI that did have some practical applications. And this is what I did, but only until I discovered, well, it doesn't pay the rent. So, and I'm bringing this up for a specific reason, because if you think, well, now we have AI and now the world is totally different, well, you might be mistaken, because AI is around for a very long time. And we have seen several times a lot of promising developments, a lot of hype, and then also the disillusionment because it just didn't live up to the expectations. And I'm just bringing this up to caution you that the hype that we are obviously seeing again might not be a good way to predict what's going to happen. If only if you take history into account, well, it might be overhyped at the moment. And this is what we would like also to focus on, what we want to elaborate on, what we want to dissect in this conversation, what could be the promising areas of applying AI to control engineering, and what is probably totally overrated. Kevin, what is your background on AI? What is your experience so far? Why are you interested in this topic?
So I've been a control system engineer for 30 years, and I've been also longer with cybersecurity. And so I've been hunting malicious actors on systems, especially critical infrastructure systems, for the past 20 years. AI, I've got interested in it, especially the past almost a year. It has a lot of things to be able to look at, lots of data, but it still can't make some great decisions when it comes to critical infrastructure.
Okay, and did you already have you been exposed to specific applications of AI on control engineering, or is it is this your judgment by reviewing the literature on the topic?
I've seen it tried to be used, but it's never gone live because there were too many concerns about it.
Okay.
I have seen some good things with it. If you're having to do some repetitive task, like in the healthcare industry, if you are looking at medical scans of individuals who may or may not have cancer, it can have a very large database, and it has been proven that it can detect cancerous growth before a human can, but it still just flags it and a human makes that decision. But it supposedly can detect cancerous growth months before a human could.
Yeah.
So that is
But
a good application.
I think the large database is a very important point that contributes to the recent hype of AI, because again, if you think back to my first experience, my first exposure to AI back in the 80s, well, at that time we didn't have all these troves of public available data on the internet. Actually, the World Wide Web didn't even exist at that time, and certainly that is a game changer, that now so much data is available publicly. However, that does not mean that it translates directly into good use cases for control engineering, and we will get back to that. So this whole idea for this conversation started based on a Twitter poll that I ran the other day, where I asked the simple question: will ChatGPT and similar AI applications replace control engineers? Oh my God! And to me, not surprisingly, 86% of the respondents said, no, that is not going to happen. And this is something that we will elaborate on in a minute. But before we do, I also thought it was funny to ask ChatGPT what it thinks about the topic, and maybe we can also bring that up. Will artificial intelligence replace control engineers? Blah, blah, blah. And the gist of it is, nah, probably not. So it might make control engineers more efficient, but it's unlikely that it's going to replace control engineers. And this is also my expectation. And again, just look at history. This is interesting in my opinion, because I have seen, or as I think what you are supposed to say these days, I'm old enough to remember a couple of times when specific developments in IT and computing brought up the idea, oh, we are no longer going to need programmers. Well, this is a thing of the past. Don't let your kids study programming. Don't send them to become good programmers. And because there are these new software tools that will do all the programming automatically, or then a couple of years later, no, with globalism, all the programmers will be in India, etc. And you know how this turned out. And I have the same expectation in respect to control engineers, but there is more to it. So in specific, now the question would be, could AI write code? Could there be automatic code generation for ladder logic? And I don't see that happening for a simple reason. So again, as we had just mentioned earlier, the present wave of AI flourishes because of a trove of data that it can dissect. Okay, and for the prototypical control system code, you don't have that, because it might be a surprise for IT people. The vast majority of control system configurations is very unique, and that has to do with the hardware and the processes that are attached to that. So, for example, in installation A, the sensors that are used to measure something are from a different manufacturer. They have different parameters, different spectrum, etc. Then for a very, very similar, if not identical, use case at a different installation, and it's about these minute differences that control engineers need to take account for, and this is then reflected in the hardware configuration. This, by the way, is why you always see control system racks. So it's not like there is this standard box that you can order from Dell. So there is no standard PLC that you can order from Siemens or Rockwell. It's always about an individual configuration. And this is one reason why I anticipate that you will always have the human expert, because the task in itself doesn't yield benefits that I could envision from an automated algorithm or from machine learning or whatever you want to call it, because of the intricacies of the individual configuration. Kevin, what are your thoughts about that? Will AI replace code generation? Will it replace control engineers?
Well, again, this is some of those camps that are out there of AI is going to eliminate everyone's jobs. Okay. And then you've got the other camp that says AI is going to bring about Skynet and will end humanity. AI still isn't that great. It is great if you have a set of data, a very large set of data, and you want it to churn through that data and make some analysis, but it has to pass that on to a human to make that final decision. There's so many things when it comes to an OT system that's highly customized for that specific environment. I mean, you use a PLC in a electric power system, it's going to look completely different from a water system. And no two systems are going to be identical anywhere in the world. I used to build these systems, and I know there's no two identical in the world. Everything is highly customized, and that's one thing AI can't do. And when it comes to writing code, I've played around with ChatGPT and some of the others to build code. And guess what? It makes mistakes. It makes a lot of errors. And you can have it try and help debug your code, but it's almost better to still Google some of that or use your search engine of choice to find some of those answers better when it comes to those error codes. So
the other thing that I find interesting here is that let's just assume that in a couple of years from now, this data problem is solved because of another breakthrough, whatever that might look like, and there will actually be AI applications that configure your control systems. Let's just do it as a thought experiment here. And this then leads us into a very interesting conceptual problem, and that would be how do you trust this code? How do you know that it's legit? How can you verify this? Right, because with the existing approaches that we have, well, let's just say you have your human control engineer. That human control engineer is using a version control system, etc. He or she can verify the code, and this idea of verification all of a sudden goes through the window as soon as I introduce something like autonomous control. Like, oh, this is the AI came up with this configuration, with this logic. I'm sure it's going to improve our efficiency by 0.5%, but you cannot verify that. That for me is a conceptual problem that is very, very difficult to resolve. So how can you authenticate? How can you verify that your autonomous control is actually legit? Or maybe it comes with the next Stuxnet in it, who knows, right? So my point here is that opens up a whole new can of worms, because the idea of verification, of validation, it just goes out of the window. Then let's just not be too negative here. Could there be anything positive about AI in control engineering? Kevin, what's your take?
Well, firstly, back to your point, AI is still like a black box. So there's no transparency. So if you are worried about regulatory or compliance issues, you can't just sit there and point to AI did this. They're going to ask, how? Can you tell me what decisions it was making? And you'd be like, I have no idea. it just churned out the data. So that black box mentality can be bad because there's no transparency. So good things AI could potentially do when it comes to control engineering is predictive maintenance. If I see something like a generator, I can see a failure start to occur in the hardware of that generator. And so I could, if I was AI, flag it and say, hey, maintenance needs to be done. Now, should that maintenance be done on a regular basis by humans? Sure, and that would eliminate the AI. But unfortunately, in the OT world, sometimes funds aren't that great. And maintenance is one of those things that sometimes gets shoved to the side, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. The people watching this live stream, keep that in mind. Funds are not that great in OT. That's unfortunately a very true statement, right? So very, yeah, unfortunately, and so consider to tell your kids, no, don't pick up a job in OT, don't become a control engineer, and even worse, don't become an OT security expert, right? So funds aren't that great. So if you are in IT and you're complaining about your lack of funding, just wait until you go into OT. So that I think that ties back to your point that you made in the intro about medical applications. By the way, my first expert systems that I actually sold for money, but not enough. They were in the medical, in the psychiatric field. So I did develop and sell an expert system for psychiatric diagnosis. It was actually used, but again, that was not. So that is a obviously a good application field, and in this respect, I think preventive maintenance, yes, that comes to mind, and I see this. I would have the same expectation. This is an area where AI could perform or will perform. I actually anticipate that. So if you just consider that you would use the trove of data in an historian and have AI just process that data constantly, I would expect that this will yield results. And I would also imagine that as we speak, companies such as OSIsoft, they will be all over AI in order to do some kind of advanced data mining, because at the end of the day, that is what it is for this type of use case. Some advanced data mining using different algorithms than previously. Certainly, we did data mining for decades, but maybe this relatively new approach with machine learning, etc., might yield some additional breakthroughs. So that would be, in my opinion, a perfect area, a perfect application area that I would be interested in as an asset owner and also as a software company in that field. Because when you think about machine data, sensor data, just look at your historian. Well, you have gigabytes of data in there that is simply waiting for this type of analysis. And then best case would certainly be if a company such as OSIsoft would be able to pool data from multiple customers just in order to enhance the data set. The other area that I would see how AI can and will enhance control engineering is if you forget about the coding side, but you think more of the everyday workflows such as problem management, service management, etc. I believe that there will be that this will be a focus of AI applications once that you have enough data to sift through. And how is what do I mean by that? So at the moment, there is very little data about these workflows that is available for automatic processing. in typical at the typical asset owner. But this is going to change because, in case you haven't noticed yet, so there are some large corporations in the IT space that are presently putting a lot of emphasis on OT. Prototypical example would be ServiceNow, and they are trying to leverage AI to enhance or to the workflow automation. They are trying to yield much more usable, actionable intelligence from analyzing existing data relating to workflows, relating to typical problems that will then help the human users. And here is how I see that play out. So if you think, let's just say 5 or 10 years ahead, then applications like ServiceNow will be used for this type of workflow automation. Think about, again, problem management, obsolescence management, something that usually happens in the OT space, in operations and maintenance. Think about I gave you enough examples. So, and once that this data is there, then you can process it using AI, and there will be benefits to that. And the missing link there, as I see it, is at this point the missing data, but that is going to come, especially for those platforms that are cloud-based already, right? So they can already pool the data from different customers. Certainly, I would assume in a sanitized form, but that might yield very significant breakthroughs. So that is what I see coming, and that would then be made possible via something like data lake. So you stuff all your existing technical documentation that you have in a data lake, as an example, right? All from your automation vendors, all the configuration documents, etc. And this then allows for a very interesting use case, in my opinion, as I know it from the field. Well, you have this very complex issue there, but you're pretty confident that somebody else already had the same issue. But your problem is you don't find the data. And this is something that AI can solve just like that.
So let me bring up a scenario. Going back to your first thing that you were doing, AI is now using people's voice recordings, or having you talk on the phone, and in 15 minutes, it can assess you psychologically to see if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, all sorts of things. And it's doing that medical analysis based on that. So that's one of the newest AI things that's out there. Now, this leads to a problem because you're saying, let's create these wealth of data. So the AI, so when you're dealing with AI, you don't contain it inside your company. You are it's outside, as you were saying, cloud-based or something like that. And so your data is going up into the cloud. And, I always say, think of the cloud as someone else's computer. So you're relying on them to do security of that. So you have the security aspect of that data, but also the privacy aspect of that data.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree, Kevin. I totally agree. I'm just too old to be optimistic. So as I see it, this will come. And if the killer argument usually is, well, but it's going to save the company 0.1% annually in maintenance cost or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, all the security and privacy concerns go out of the window. That is how it works in reality. Unfortunately, I'm not happy about it. I'm just saying it as it is. But getting to your point with the voice recognition, etc., I think that's amazing. So because if you think about it, the AI maybe also only needs to listen to the voice of this control engineer and figure out right away, this is a Siemens guy, he is working on the Siemens PCS7. I can hear that already, right? And I can already anticipate which problems he is going to have. So certainly that's just humorous, but I totally agree on all the data security issues. But again, I wouldn't even say pessimist. I hope I can claim to be a realist. I just predict this trend is going to continue. All the data will be shoved into the cloud because there are some financial incentives to that, and for some reason that simply makes all other concerns go away. Okay, so let's then think about OT security. What is the potential impact of AI on OT security? Will it have an impact? What can it do? What can't it do? What is your take on that, Kevin?
So there's a lot of people that like the concept for threat detection. So being able to look through things and see anomalies and to detect that quickly. But the difficulty is that's a great concept for the IT space. When it comes to OT space, if I'm a malicious actor and I'm attacking it, I'm going to use the system against itself. So I'm going to have it send regular commands like open breaker, close breaker, open this valve, which would appear like a normal bit of traffic. So I don't see AI quickly making those decisions and understanding that. And I also worry a lot about the if you have AI running your system and you're a malicious actor attacking it, you could actually spoof things, change some settings, and just make it appear to the system that settings have changed when it's not. And then the AI may go, oh, we better open up that valve or, open up that circuit breaker because bad things are happening. Well, now you just did the intended attack.
Well, I think what you're saying is, in a way, that it's naive to assume that the application of AI to OT security would per se make a system more secure. And so if that is what you are saying, I would agree with that, because I don't see that. I've never seen it in the past. I don't expect to see that in the future. It doesn't per se deliver better security. The question for me would be, well, could it enhance or could it solve several persistent problems associated with OT security? And the one thing that would come to my mind is, and maybe even the only example that comes to my mind, is the persistent problem of false positives in network anomaly detection. Because if you think about it, well, all what your SOC guys are doing when they are looking at OT traffic, they're just working on false positive alerts, and my thinking is there might be a way to automate this better than in the past. Obviously, this is an unsolved problem, because otherwise, if it was solved, you would fire the SOC analysts, at least as far as OT is concerned, right? And just remember my words, mark my words, guys. Once that it can be solved via an algorithm, your job is gone. Sorry, right?
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the problems that has persisted in this field for decades. Is if you start recording all of the data and you start creating log files of everything, you create these really big log files that, I hate to tell you, 99.99% of all control engineers aren't going to look into that log file until after something has happened and they're trying to troubleshoot it. So the difficulty is churning through all of that data. And so AI might be able to do that, but I haven't seen that yet. I've been wishing for decades that someone could take all of that data in log files and put it into an easy to read, screen for a control engineer. Because guess what? They don't know anything about looking in these files. They're not going to see anomalies. They're not going to be, that's not their job.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, when you give these up to, you're like, well, let's take all these alerts and all these log files and we'll send them over to IT. Guess what? The IT security team has no idea what these things mean. They don't understand the systems. They don't, they go, hey, we got like bad password attempts on this account, and I was like, that's the master account. And you can do anything with that account on the OT system. And they're like, so I guess we should alert them immediately when we see those. And I'm like, well, yeah. So that's the problem, is it's too much data and no one has created a great viewpoint for the control engineer to bring up that data and potentially respond to it. So maybe AI could do that. But again, we're nowhere close yet.
Yeah, well, I agree in this respect, because I know as a fact that that asset owners are working towards that goal, that they would like to have this capability, but as you say, it just isn't there yet. And in my opinion, that might be a use case that might benefit from the application of artificial intelligence. The other thing that comes to my mind when thinking about AI in the context of OT security is, and that gets me back to my initial remark about autonomous control. So if you want to, or if you play around with the idea to pick up approaches that we have seen in IT security, to enhance IT security using AI, and if you want to use the same approach in OT, well, you might run into trouble, and here is why. So there is, in my opinion, a poster child of the attempt to leverage AI for IT security, and that is the ARPA Grand Cyber Challenge. If you haven't heard about it, you have to Google this. There are videos on it on YouTube that you will find easily. And basically, in a nutshell, what I'm going here with is in that Cyber Grand Challenge, computer software was fighting against each other, but autonomously, right? So there was no operator influence. Everything was done automatically, and the goal was to attack the rival machine, take over the rival machine, just using AI concepts. Okay, and that also involved the attempts to automatically defend against these attacks, up to the point of the automatic deployment of patches. So that when the algorithm discovered, this rival machine is trying to exploit that particular vulnerability, then bang, it would immediately apply a patch and mitigate that vulnerability. Well, that sounds like some really next level shit, and I think it is. However, it probably is not a good idea to do that in OT. And I challenged the project leader of the Cyber Grand Challenge in a discussion. Well, what about all these industrial control systems? Because just not necessarily randomly, but automatically changing the configuration in respect to patches, etc., that could backfire, right? And as you would guess, he had to agree on that. So that is what I think we should not forget, right? That any autonomous or automatic configuration changes might backfire, even if they are done with the best intent. And we have seen that over and over again in OT, right? When the IT team tried to automatically patch dozens of Windows PCs on the shop floor, and then that resulted in an outage. What do you think about that, Kevin?
Yeah, part of that whole thing that you have to worry about AI taking over for cybersecurity is, people may become reliant on AI. So let's say in the future, a decade from now, there's a great big database and they're eliminating people's jobs and they're putting AI in there. But you still have to have some humans. Now, what happens when something bad goes on that system and you don't, the operators that are there don't understand what the AI is doing.
Yeah.
And if you try and disconnect the AI and manually take over,
It's going to shoot you. It's going to shoot. Skynet. We have seen it. Come on, we have seen it. Yes.
But if you start relying on this too much, your control engineers aren't going to know how to handle the system.
Absolutely.
Because they've been reliant on this computer making all the decisions. Yeah. You got to look back at, electric power grid. 100 plus years ago, we didn't have all these computers and all this electronics. And sure, there were some failures in the grid system. Okay, couple of failures, but for the most case, these systems were running fine without all these computers. So now you bring it into the computers are here and they're interconnected into these OT systems, and sometimes a little interconnected too much. So you still have that aspect that you have to worry about that connection. So AI is going to bring a whole new level of concern and worry, because in the end, you still need humans who can go in there and troubleshoot the system and bring it back online. Because what happens if the AI that's running it, the computer fails and goes down? Because, computers sometimes have problems, right? And a hard drive crashes or a connection goes down. Where's going to be your human who's going to be running things?
Yeah, I think the basic problem that you point to is that we must be very careful to not just give away control. To me, this is at the core of the problem, right? This is about the fundamental question: who is in control, and what it could mean that you give away too much control. So just to stimulate the thoughts of our viewers, if we want to go for a Skynet here, and I take your example from critical infrastructure. Well, guess what? In a nuclear power plant, there are systems that you will only get to after passing a couple of automatic doors with key locks, etc. So you have to use your badge, right? Otherwise, you will not physically arrive at these systems. And as procedures are presently, if you try to break in, you will be stopped with lethal force, right? Now, if we go full Skynet here and just imagine we have passed all security control to the AI, and unfortunately the AI regards you as a threat. Oh, that wouldn't be nice, right? There is something fishy going on with your safety systems in the nuke plant, but you can no longer get there. So I wouldn't want to see that happening. And also, to me, I have to say the basic problems of OT security, as I see them, they don't need AI. So in order to address the basic problems, what you need is a lot of sweat. It's a grind, right? It's you need discipline, and no AI is going to help you with that. And the problem that I see with AI, or how AI is perceived, usually it's perceived like, oh, that's nice. Well, we will no longer have to do all that boring stuff, right? We can just sit back and relax and enjoy ourselves, and maybe in some kind of of Wall-E scenario. So for those who haven't seen the movie or the Disney movie Wall-E, you have to see that as some dystopian vision of what the future holds for us when everybody no longer needs to work because the AI took care of everything, right? So that is probably what some people associate with and why they are fascinated about AI, because, well, I don't have to do all this work. I just need to enjoy myself. I think it's not going to happen this way. And again, I'm totally convinced that, well, OT security is not a difficult problem to solve. There are some more difficult aspects where, and I said that earlier, where I think AI might help, but you don't need to wait for AI to make your OT infrastructure bulletproof. So that is not necessary. You can do that right now.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, AI right now is great for if you are staring at a blank page and don't know where to start. You can give it a prompt and it can give you an idea. You have to be careful of AI though, because regrettably its database is only so big and it will make things up. You can even ask it to cite sources, and I have seen it make up sources that do not exist. It gets a right name for an author or someone in the field, but makes up an article on a specific year that never happened.
Mm.
And it's just like that's interesting.
Gotcha.
So yes.
Yeah, and certainly what we have also seen already is that your ChatGPT and other platforms are actually biased because the people who run these platforms, they want to make them biased, and they have succeeded to some extent to that. So certainly there are a lot of potential problems associated with that. Okay, so I think with that, we have pretty much covered the basics of this fascinating field. And Braxton, do we have any questions from the audience?
So as far as questions come, if you're watching, feel free to drop them in the chat or the comment section of YouTube and LinkedIn. As they roll in, one question that I do want to ask is, what are some examples of when AI would be good for kind of OT engineering?
For engineering, I don't see it, as I have said earlier. Kevin, what's your take?
Well, I guess that maintenance and troubleshooting, I could see it as a good thing.
Yes.
If you feed in all of that data and have a great wealth of data, it could potentially see a problem and call, that human's perspective of, hey, you might want to go check that generator system, or you may want to go check that valve where I've been getting, intermittent signals from.
Preventive maintenance, yes. Mm-hmm.
Preventive maintenance. I think that would be a very good case for it. I don't see it though for system integration and interoperability. Mm-hmm. You still need humans because unfortunately, when it comes to IT spaces, it's not a one vendor fits all environment. Mm-hmm. You've got this vendor, you've got that vendor, and all these things have to work together. So trying to figure out that customized case, that's where you need some human smarts.
Yeah, and also what we should not forget here is that when you think about quantity, and quantity is important for the quality of the data pool. Quantity in OT is like minimal when you compare it to IT. Right. So Kevin, you work in critical infrastructure. So like the number of DCSs for, let's just say, electric power plants. Well, yeah, that's a handful compared to IT installations, cloud servers, right? We are talking about billions, and then a couple of hundred DCSs for electrical power plants. So that's a totally different story. And I agree with that for the integration, etc. So in other words, our esteemed integrators probably don't need to fear being replaced by AI as well.
So kind of on that note, here's a question. Splunk has an OT plugin that can make sense of some of the OT protocols. Do you think that combining the IT and the OT logs would be a good idea for better awareness?
Well, absolutely. If you also add context by purchasing our Splunk technical add-on for OT base, that was a great segue for me to turn this into a sales pitch. So, but I mean, all humor aside, yes, there are some good use cases for utilizing Splunk. And let me just put it this way. There are some ways how you can actually get good results by using Splunk for anomaly detection. And that involves combining various data sources from IT, from OT, and also getting in the context. One of the problems is for the whole SIEM application field in general, many times you just see an IP address or a MAC address. Oh no, there is some alert with that, right? But what does it mean? Certainly, if you would know, oh damn, that's the IP address of our safety engineering station. That's a totally different story than that's from that cheap access switch, or Bob has his printer hanging on that switch, right? And this type of context is what you get by integrating with an OT asset management system. Kevin?
Yeah, and that IT/OT, there kind of needs to be a little bit of connection between those two. I've been fighting this argument for well over 20 years of the IT people do the IT, the OT people do the OT. And I said, so who does cybersecurity on the OT side of things? And the IT guy goes, OT. And OT goes, we don't do anything about that. We just keep the IT guys out. And so that's one of the flaws of we need a little bit of connection, a little bit, create a charter in your company of having those two groups kind of interface and talk to each other. Because if you are sending up all the logs to IT security, who has better ways and maybe even has that AI to look through data, they're still not going to understand the context. So until you bring them up to speed on what these things mean, just pooling up your data into one place isn't going to do any good. They need to understand that context.
Great. So with that, I do want to respect everybody's time. Just a quick reminder for everybody that's joining, we're going to host a masterclass on vulnerability management on Wednesday. Feel free to tune in. We'll live stream to both LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Great discussion. Look forward to the next talk.
Thanks for having me.